Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to this week's episode of the Niche Cast. We're from the Niche Cache, the niche-cache.com, otherwise known on the streets as at the Niche Cache. And we are here for Aotearoa sport. We love Aotearoa, we love Aotearoa sport. One thing that has decreased as far as love and vibrant Aotearoa sporting energy has been Steven Adams and the Memphis Grizzlies. And this is where we get doing a little warm-up korero to start our Nishcast episode. Memphis Grizzlies have become a whole lot less fun without Steven Adams. I think they are way less good without Steven Adams, and it's been a bit of a bummer just watching the demise of the fun, vibrant Kiwi Memphis Grizzlies over the past few weeks, most notably in their NBA playoff series against the Los Angeles Lakers. How have you been consuming the relic? Is that a right word of that? I don't know, but it's like there once was exuberance with Steven Adams and the Memphis Grizzlies. Now it's not there. It's all a bit sad. How are you feeling about it?
It is sad, isn't it? Because it's like they had, I don't know, they're such a fun team when Adams is with them and just like pulling some strings and like whipping passes from the top of the key and grabbing offensive rebounds and all these things. And then it's the eternal thing that we go through is like saying, well, we know Steven Adams is underrated. So we just hang out pointing out reasons why he's underrated and then watching everyone else focus on Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson and dudes like this instead. But it just seems abundantly clear when he's not there that they're not the same team. Like they don't have the same upside. They still have some star players who can win them games on their day, but they just you see the ways in which Adams ties things together. Because even like Xavier Tillman playing instead of him is putting up nice numbers, and yet like putting up as nice a numbers as Adams would, maybe less so on the assists thing, but he's rebounding as well as Adams did, and he's scoring probably a bit better than Adams would. But he's not lifting the performance of the guys around him in the way that Adams does, and it just makes them, I don't know, they're a lot more grindy than gritty at the moment, which is an issue because they need to be the grit and grind Grizzlies, don't they? And I mean, you start to see without like that extra bit of I don't know, enjoyable likability or whatever it is without Steven Adams in there, you start to see why a lot of people like fans of other teams actually kind of hate the Grizzlies, which is funny because you do see like the young dudes are kind of exposed for some of the cockiness and whatnot without the senior veteran there to kind of like balance things. And the Dylan Brooks stuff has been at first really fun. Like when he's talking about like how he goes out and pokes bears and he's like, I don't respect LeBron James, the greatest player of all time. I don't respect him until he scores 40 points on me, which was fine. Like that's fun. You want those kind of antagonists in the playoffs. But then as soon as they lost, he just stopped doing interviews and is like, nah, I'm not talking to the media. The media are making me out to be a villain. It's like you did this yourself, bro. Live with, like, not just live with it, own it. You made this really fun narrative to the series, and then you just walked away from it as soon as the first thing went wrong, which kind of shows a bit of I don't know. It's one of those things we're quite spoiled, I think, at this part of the world for being able to watch team sports where the emphasis is on the team, and it's definitely a Kiwi sports thing, but you see it as well in the NRL for sure. That's definitely a factor as the best team wins rather than the team with the best individuals. A lot of footballing stuff that I watch from Europe, I think definitely plays up on that aspect too. Like the team has to be, you sacrifice for the team. NBA just doesn't do that so much. And it's always such a weird thing of being like, because some of the like Andrew Webster with the Warriors and the stuff we'll talk that we've been talking about for a couple of months about how he's molding this team and like getting the buy-in from all these things. You can see that as like a job that a coach has to do. It just seems so strange to then look at the NBA and consider it's like you can't just put the players in the best position, inspire them, get them to go. You also have to deal with just completely over the top egos. Like it just seems like it's this whole extra factor that only really exists to that extent in American sports, which is just strange. And there's a lot of that in the NBA in general. It's not just the Grizzlies problem, but I think some of that Grizzlies stuff is showing through when you don't have Steven Adams to paper over all the cracks around them.
It's the old chestnut of like some of the best athletes, they make everyone around them better. But this is also a case of that, which is like Steven Adams makes the Memphis Grizzlies a better team, as well as making all the individuals better. But it's also a balance between that and just bringing out the manner and the positive vibes of a team. Because without Steven Adams, there's no positive vibes with the Memphis Grizzlies. So he's like, it's a double whammy. Like the team's not as good, the players aren't as good, and they're just annoying, which is it's just straight up. The Memphis Grizzlies are just annoying without Steven Adams, and we are here. It's just a little taste, a little warm-up korero there. We'll get into some big old Aotearoa sporting yarns throughout today's episode. We've got NBL, we've got Blackcaps, we've got Wellington Phoenix, we've got NRL, Warriors versus Roosters. A little bit of information about the Black Sticks as well. Fresh on our website, theniche-case.com. Got a Blackcaps ODI series preview against Pakistan. We've got the Flying Kiwis weekly yarn live. There will be Warriors versus Roosters preview and other things popping up on the website, theniche-case.com. That's where we take our deep dives. That's where we really get into the mangroves of some key Aotearoa sporting topics. We don't go as deep in the mangroves for our email newsletter. We tend to just get the boogie board out and go for a paddle through the mangroves, through the estuaries. We don't get the kayak. We just get the boogie board out and we just go for a little paddle. We just touch on some current eventy stuff with Aotearoa Sport, and that comes out every Monday and Friday evening via Substack, theniche-case.substack.com. Lots of Kiwi-NRL junior information will be in tomorrow's email. Stuff like reflecting on the Redcliffe Dolphins under-18 team winning the Queensland Championship with John Finninga-Ngofo, Patrick Kailahi, Elijah Rasmussen, all of whom played first 15 rugby in Aotearoa. If anyone tracking the league versus union battle, not much of a battle at the junior ranks. Also got a SG Ball final this weekend. We've got Te Huranui Twiddle at fullback for the Eels, and we've got a Knights team stacked with Kiwi NRL talent. There is no Jerome Falemoy this week. He's I think he got injured in the semi-final, but we do have his Southern Cross homie Elijah Leao-Moana starting on an edge. We got Tamakai Moana, Whare Aurere on the bench. We got Jaden Harris on the bench, and we got Bailey Carmichael on the extended bench. There's a lot of Kiwi NRL funk in the SG Ball final this weekend. Also, just want to bring up another player, Tavita Henare Schuster. He's from Wellington, and the Roosters signed him, and I think he played his first game of Roosters under-21s last weekend, starting at centre. He is also from rugby union. He was in the Hurricanes under-20s team, and he also played, I think he was at Palmerston North Boys High School. Don't quote me on that one, I'll have to double check, but he definitely came through the Wellington rugby system. Roosters signed him, and if the Roosters are signing a player at that age bracket, it's because he's really good. And he played his first game last week, so I'll be diving into that. And again, he's from rugby union, so anyone tracking that? Not much of a battle at the junior ranks, and that's just a wee taster of what we're going to dish up in our email newsletter tomorrow on Friday. Lots of bits and bobs covering Aotearoa sport there. And big up the Patreon whānau. You can support the Niche Case directly, straight up the guts via Patreon. Patreon.com/El Niche Case, EL Niche Case. Check it out. There's an extra podcast there every week. We like to reflect on the weekend sporting action for the Patreon whānau, and otherwise it's just a great way to support our content directly without all the fluff. You can just go straight up the guts, run it hard, run it straight, and support the Niche Case in all our content, whatever sport you love, whether it's any sport specifically or whether it's just Aotearoa sport. You can support our mahi through Patreon, patreon.com/our niche case. Let us wiggle into some mindfulness. What do you got?
Got a doozy from the main man, Hunter S. Thompson, who said, when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro.
What do you mean pro?
You go professional. You
Professionally
cash in.
weird?
You make the most of your weirdness. You know, the weirder times get, the more weirdness becomes a sort of a virtue or a an advantage. You know, you strange times call for strange measures
And strange people.
and strange people. You know,
That was a bit of a weird mindfulness, I'll give you that one.
I don't. I try not to shy away from a bit of weirdness. I increasingly find I like stuff that is just different. You know, like if I want to watch a movie, I'd rather watch a movie that is a bad movie but does something I've never seen before than something that's like paint by numbers 7 out of 10. Yeah, that's a good solid film, but I could have seen the same thing with different actors in a different script 20 times before. You know, give me a little bit of that weirdness.
Here's hoping we can go pro. Here's hoping we can get our Patreon
Yeah.
numbers up and hit the old YouTube monetization, and our weirdness can amount to going to professional, because we are definitely not professional as much as we would love to be. Aotearoa sport. Just want to touch on the Black Sticks, because really interesting times for Black Sticks hockey. They had a big weekend of basically Anzac hockey in the Pro League. The results, both teams lost to Great Britain. The men lost 5-2, the women lost 2-0, and then on Anzac Day, both teams lost to Australia. They lost 2-1, and the women lost 2-1, and the men lost 3-0. And they're back again this week for even more games against the same nations. They're playing, I think the Kiwis are in action tomorrow on Friday, the men against Great Britain. And then we've got on Saturday, the women against Great Britain. And then on Sunday, it looks like there's 2 more games against Australia. And in the Pro League, after that weekend of hockey, the men are 9th, which is dead last, which is good for them. They've scored 12 goals and they've conceded 23 goals. The women, they're rocking and rolling. They're 8th out of 9 teams. They've scored 9 goals and they've conceded 12 goals. And it's been quite interesting tracking Black Sticks hockey, because they're like, you see it around the coverage and just around bits and bobs following the Black Sticks. They're very quick to highlight that a lot of young players are playing in the Black Sticks right now. A lot of debutants coming up against like a good, really good GB team, and coming up against Australia, a great effort from the youngsters. The key issue that I would like to highlight for our listeners and our audience about Black Sticks hockey is they lose when their best players are playing. And you can go through all the major tournaments recently, you can go through previous Pro League hockey. Like the Black Sticks, I've kind of narrowed it down to the last 5 years. They've been losing a lot, and with many of their best players, neither team won a Commonwealth Games medal for the first time in Black Sticks Commonwealth Games history last year. So they had all their best players, and neither team won a medal for the first time. So now we've got like a decent track record of, it doesn't matter who's playing, whether it's the best players, whether it's young players, they lose. And it's like over this period, there have been multiple waves of debutantes. So now we're thinking like the Black Sticks junior pipeline kind of sucks, because each wave of youngsters and debutantes doesn't help the team win. And also from that weekend of Black Sticks hockey, like it summed it up nicely, because over the last 5 years, both Black Sticks teams, they not only do they lose regardless of who's playing, they lose in different ways. They can concede goals early and lose. I think the women scored an early goal against Australia and then lost 2-1 because they conceded 2 late goals. They can dominate a game and lose. They can suck and lose. So they're losing in a variety of ways. They're losing with a variety of personnel. No one seems to care. Like you don't see folks whinging and moaning about Black Sticks hockey in the same way they do about the football Ferns, but that tells you all you need to know about Kiwi hockey right now. So it's very interesting, and I'm just tracking it. Just intrigued, just curious, just to see if my intuition and my read on the scenario is correct. And at the moment, I think I said the same thing last week, previewing this weekend's hockey. Like, I'm curiously observing. And based on last weekend's action, I am pretty confident in my beliefs about Kiwi hockey right now. So we'll check in again after this weekend's action. Shout out to, and just again to prove the point about how they lose, there was a bloke, I think his name is Rintala, Aussie. He was like playing his second game or something like that. He scored a hat trick in the first 25 minutes, and that was the 3-0 win. So not only was the new player for Australia scored a hat trick while the new players for the Black Sticks lose, but they just conceded 3 goals early. That's the game. See you later. And it's just like, however you want to lose a game, they can do it. Men and women. There's no difference. So very interesting times for Kiwi hockey.
I mean, you did mention a football Ferns comparison in there. There was quite a few times when you listened to some of that stuff where it felt like there was a lot going on, that were a lot of parallels going on. It's even like really specifically, there was a game last year, I think last April, I think it was, when the football Ferns played against Australia in a couple games. There was literally a game in which they scored an early goal. It was a wonder goal too, Anna Green with that volley from the sideline almost. Were 1-0 up for most of the game, defending, and then conceded 2 late goals and lost 2-1. And that literally happened to the football Ferns, just as it happened to the it was the Black Sticks women, wasn't it, on the weekend that happened to. It's almost identical. I will say one difference is that the Ferns, I don't think they've had waves on waves of young players coming through. It's sort of like they've had a wave. That might still happen. They might have just been at the start of that, but they haven't necessarily. They have been a good team for sticking with their players. Like, there was definitely a wave, 2008-10 sort of range, where you started to see like Ursig, Riley, Hassett and Percival and some of these players who have stuck around for a long time since, all getting debuts quite young all at once, and then persevered with for a long time. The issue with that is they only persevered with them, and they never did anything about cultivating a second tier, which meant that when when those players of that age started retiring, you've got to pick players rather than having like 30 or 40 cap players ready to go. You've got 0 to 5 cap players ready to go, not so ready to go, which is, I think, maybe a difference there. But in terms of the results, in terms of the longevity of those results, I found myself struggling not to make comparisons. You could have been talking about either team, that either of the any of the 3 teams in that category. I wouldn't include the All Whites, though. I think the All Whites tend to lose in their own specific fashion. They just play a certain way, and they either score a goal or they don't. And if they don't, they probably lose 1-0 or 2-0 or something. They don't tend to get thrashed. And they do actually have a really nice wave of young players pushing through at the moment as well. So I wouldn't include them in that, but the football Ferns thing did seem a bit.
I wouldn't include any football in this conversation. Like, the football Ferns, they're okay. They're not as bad as the Black Sticks for sure. Like, there's no.
Well,
I don't see any.
There is a difference there as well between underperforming versus just being at the level that you're at in the world, sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't see any similarities. Sorry to shut down your football fans' information, but I don't see any similarities between the two. Like, football's humming on all cylinders in New Zealand. Hockey, we're seeing a steep decline in the quality of Kiwi hockey, which is very different to the standing of football in New Zealand. So there's Black Sticks hockey again this weekend, and we'll keep tracking, and we'll see if anyone cares. NBL basketball. We will touch on NBL basketball again this week, because last week we touched on the Nuggets, the Auckland Tuatara, the Hawke's Bay Hawks, and the Franklin Bulls. Those were the top 4 last Thursday. The Franklin Bulls, they're 2-2. They've dropped down to 7th, but we do have the Canterbury Rams. They have jumped up to 1st. They're 3-1. They share 6 points with the Nuggets and the Tuatara. We have broken down the Nuggets and Tuatara already this season. So we'll touch on the Rams right here and now. Some key, I can do better language there, some important Kiwis in the Canterbury Rams team. We've got Ty Wynyard. We've got Walter Brown, your mate, Walter Brown. Not to be confused with old Walter White. We have Max Darling, and we got Taylor Britt. Now, you said pre-show that something's happening with old Ty Wynyard. What's happening there for Ty Wynyard, leading figure for the Canterbury Rams so far this season, the best team in the NBL?
Yeah, they've been brilliant. They've been brilliant to watch. They've got guys in a variety of positions. They got some, not only do they have useful imports, I think they have imports who are going to get a lot better than they have been so far, because they have been probably a little bit more reliant on guys like Ty Wynyard, for example. So I think the fact that Ty Wynyard is now leaving is an opportunity for some of those import guys to step up and do some, cover the gap, pick up some of those statistical offsets. But yeah, Ty Wynyard is somewhat breaking news yesterday was that he's signed a big money, like I think they said it's like $250,000 contract to go play 3x3 stuff professionally in China. And that makes him the first Kiwi player to sign a specific professional 3x3 contract, which is cool. It's probably takes away his potential of playing a playing NBL next season. I think that might take him a bit too deep into the season for that. Probably also takes away, or definitely will, because he'll be under contract during that thing. He probably takes away his opportunity maybe of being an outside chance of cracking the Tall Blacks World Cup squad. But that's big money. Like, that's incredibly big money. And you take that offer when it comes along, and you set yourself up for the rest of your life kind of thing. That's big yarns from Ty Wynyard. It's very interesting that it's the 3x3 stuff as well, because I think a lot of the 3x3 has really helped reinvigorate his career playing for the Tallbacks and various Asia Cups, and I think he would have gone to the Olympics with that team and Com Games and whatnot. Like, that stuff has not only improved his touch as a basketball player, like some of the skill set stuff has certainly helped from it. I think it's also just got him into a rhythm of playing basketball again, because he was like, as a teenager, he was signed by Kentucky University. He was like he was the next biggest prospect since Steven Adams, and it just didn't work out for him. And there was an interesting thing on the news where he talked about like his when his college thing sort of spun out, and then he came back and he was just like living a depressed life and not leaving the house and eating too much, and fitness wasn't there, and he'd put on weight. And because it's definitely a notable thing in the last 2 years where he's really got going at NBL level, you've seen how much fitter he looks. And I mean, I think the 3x3 stuff probably gets a lot of credit for that. And I also think it's a cool story that's therefore been rewarded into this incredible opportunity to go make heaps of money playing 3x3 in China, because apparently there's a professional 3x3 league in China, which is the first I've ever heard about it, but I'm not surprised. So there you go. Does mean that the Canterbury Rams don't have one of their best local players for the rest of the season. So wish them well, but it is a problem that the Rams will have to solve.
They do have Walter Brown. I was pretty surprised to see that he is second for minutes per game at the Canterbury Rams. So he's obviously earning those minutes. He's commanding selection and game time. Max Darling is an interesting baller from Aotearoa as well. I don't know if he is necessarily as dominant as he could be, but that, along with Taylor Britt, that is really good depth in the Canterbury outfit, because as you said, there's a bunch of imports in the team, and especially if Ty Wynyard's gone now, that could open things up for Max Darling to increase his role in the Canterbury Rams outfit. He's also a more willing three-point shooter than Ty Wynyard was. He's probably not as big and tall as Ty Wynyard, but he is. You're talking about Ty Wynyard's fitness. Like, Max Darling is chunkier in a good way than Ty Wynyard, and he's also shooting the three ball, which is interesting. And Taylor Britt is another one who he seems to be playing second fiddle to the imports, but I was happy you included him in our NBL selection, variety show selection outfit. Shout out to the variety show. Check that out on the YouTube and on your podcast feeds as well. We named a team with Hiram Harris, Hawke's Bay Hawks, Ruben Tarangi Tuatara, Rob Lowe Tuatara, Taylor Britt Canterbury, and who else did you have?
Dorone Okawa from Hawke's Bay Hawks.
Dorone Ruokawa. Taylor Britt's there, and he's like a classic basketballing point guard in the sense that he just sets the table. He just lets everyone else get their thing, and that is a perfect player to have alongside a good import crew, but also coming off the bench to help set up different blokes as well.
Yeah, I think the Max Starling thing is really interesting because he does, as you point out there, he does seem to be the guy who is probably going to benefit the most from Ty Wynyard leaving. I don't know if they'll sign a replacement or not, but he's definitely someone who has been playing backup minutes behind Wynyard. He also can play power forward, so you can play alongside Wynyard a fair bit as well. But without that big interior presence, Darling is definitely someone who could potentially step up. And then I think also there's an interesting parallel too if you get like the Judd Flavel bounce of like what he's managed to achieve coaching Ty Wynyard into the level that Wynyard's got to. Max Starling is also someone who didn't go to college, but he was a highly touted prospect coming up, went and played professionally in Croatia instead. So he signed like a 3-year sort of sub-professional deal in Croatia. And then the plan was that you do that for 3 years, and then you go to the NBA draft and see if you can get drafted out of like going through the European route rather than the college system. But he left there after like a year or two. I think it might have been a COVID related thing. I think it might have been he came back because COVID was happening, but he also wasn't really playing for them. He's getting like a couple minutes a game kind of thing. Comes back and he signed as a DP for Illawarra. I think it was Illawarra, one of the Aussie teams anyway. And I'm pretty sure that was a multi-year deal as well. And I don't think he lasted past the first season. I think they cut him because he wasn't quite, I don't know, he wasn't what they wanted from a development player or something. So he's not had quite the same high-profile spinouts or more extreme spinouts that Wynyard might have had earlier on in his career, leading to himself getting like a nice resurgence at the age that he's at now. But Max Starling has had a couple stutter steps along his career, and maybe this is an opportunity for him to get the same level of the mentorship that Judd Flavel's been credited with Ty Wynyard. If he can weave a little bit of that same magic with Max Starling, I think it's a good place for him to be, and I think this might be an opportunity for him to boost up some of their minutes. I think also definitely Taylor Britt has more to offer in some of those things, just speaking of him, because I think, for example, because we're 4 games into the season, so everything is still a bit skewed by small sample size stuff. And they did have a triple overtime game in which old mate Wally Brown was incredible, and he was then fantastic in the game straight after that. But Brown, the first 2 games, I think there was one where he got foul trouble. There was one where he didn't do much because they were focusing on getting Wynyard the ball inside, and it was just the game plan. With Taylor Britt, he had foul trouble in that overtime game, so he barely even played. He only got about 15 minutes. The game went, 55 minutes. He played less than a third of it. And when they finally brought him back, he fouled out straight away in the overtime period. So he's been limited a little bit just because he's been trying to get the guys going around him. He's also maybe been limited a little bit just because of random situations that you get early in the season. But I do expect him to start popping up with certainly some more of them assists. Because I think there's the one thing I noticed in the overtime game in particular. It was a little bit better in the game where they beat, I think it was Franklin a couple of days later, a little bit better there. But certainly in the overtime game, all those imports looked solid. They looked aggressive. They looked like they had the right mentality out there, but shots weren't dropping. Like I think in that game, all 3 of them had more shot attempts than points, which is normally a nice little indicator of whether they've been an efficient shooter or not. None of them were. I can't remember which one it was. There's one dude who got a bunch of assists though and looked pretty handy, like making things happen outside of the scoring. But yeah, they've got some weapons, that Canterbury Rams team. I've really enjoyed watching them early in the season. I think they're genuine title contenders. But the Ty Wynyard departure certainly shakes things up.
It will be fascinating to see what happens with the Canterbury Rams losing Ty Wynyard, because 7 out of the 10 teams have 2 wins or more.
Yeah.
Shout out to the Nelson Giants and Wellington Saints, who are yet to win a game. We also had news that Hiram Harris, he's joining the Perth Wildcats for the next NBL season. You don't need to go, I'm not going to let you go deep into this because we stay present in the moment. We deal with what's in front of us, but you are interested in what's happening at the Perth Wildcats as far as their Kiwi flavor goes.
Yeah, because Hiram Harris has signed, I think, a 2-year fully guaranteed contract, which, I mean, whichever team signed Hiram Harris was going to get a big boost, because he very clearly at Adelaide last year just wasn't quite given the opportunities he should have been. So it made sense that he would want to leave. It made sense that they wouldn't want to re-sign him. Fair enough. But whichever team was going to get Hiram Harris was clearly going to get a nice big boost from a player who had a lot more to give than he was given the opportunity for. So I suggested several times the Breakers should absolutely be in that conversation. He just seemed like a guy who would fit that mentality perfectly as a versatile guy, a very good defender. In the end, Perth Wildcats got him. And that's especially funky because this is within a week of the Perth Wildcats confirming that they are going to be bringing back both Corey and Ty Webster, both the Webster brothers. It had been said that they were going to bring back Corey, who I think started slowly for them last year, but then sort of midway through, he found his feet alongside Bryce Codd, and he became a pretty efficient scorer for them in the end, which is good areas for Corey Webster. He was real handy for them. Ty Webster, not so much because he signed mid-season and then got an injury, and so he never really got an opportunity. He didn't really know which way that was going to go. As it is, they're bringing them both back. That's beautiful. They also have Jack Andrew as a development player for his second year as well, and he is playing for the Otago Nuggets this season off the bench, so not big minutes. He's a young guy. He's not quite had the Walter Brown bounce yet in this particular season, the first year after getting a development gig in Australia. But maybe that's coming. But interesting things, because Perth Wildcats always, traditional rivals of the Breakers, of the only New Zealand team in the competition. Traditional rivals because for so long, those two were the trendsetters. There was a 8 or 9 year period where they were the only teams that won, just back and forth. They were the only teams that won the NBL championship. There are 4 contracted New Zealanders as it stands for the Perth Wildcats next season. It's a really handy little group that they've got together. At least 1 or 2 of them should be starting as well. It's I don't know. I always find it quite interesting and exciting when you get these little pockets of Kiwi talent at sporting clubs around the world. Where it's not just one dude blazing a path. It's like, for example, in Perth, here are 4 Kiwi basketballers signed up for next season. Taylor Britt, I should mention as well, was a development player at Perth for a few years. Maybe they should bring him back and really fill out the crew, since we're mentioning him earlier. But nice little pocket emerging at the Cats. I didn't see it coming, but there we are.
So there's a couple names to watch out for in the NBL. Obviously, Hiram Harris goes without saying, but also Jack Andrew with the Otago Nuggets. Keep an eye on him. Can the Wellington Phoenix get a draw? That's the storyline this week in the A-League with regards to the Wellington Phoenix. I'm sure there's lots of funky Kiwi football things happening outside of the A-League realms, but there's nothing more important than Wellington Phoenix getting a draw, at least against Macarthur FC. And this is going to be a riveting contest because neither team has won a game in their last 5 games. The Wellington Phoenix have lost 4 out of their last 5 games. The Macarthur FC have lost 3 out of their last 5 games. So they're obviously in better form than the Wellington Phoenix. And they are the only teams in the A-League right now who haven't won a game in their last 5 games. So this is a exceptional battle of 2 talented footballing teams. It should be said that the Wellington Phoenix, in theory, are more talented because they are 6th on the ladder. Macarthur FC are dead last. And the reason Wellington Phoenix need a draw is to make the finals. and hold on to that 6th spot and play finals footy. When I'm thinking about getting a draw, at least, I'm thinking about scoring goals and I'm thinking about stopping goals. And both of those things have been rather hefty issues for the Wellington Phoenix in recent weeks in their last 5 games. Let's say that. We have touched on recent podcast episodes. I think it was a draw at Eden Park against Brisbane Roar, and then losing 4-0 to the Western Sydney Wanderers last week. Both games featured pretty mediocre defense, but that Brisbane Roar game especially featured a stinky lack of confidence in front of goal. So it's intriguing. It's interesting. Sitting in a similar spot here as the Black Sticks, where I'm like, I'm curious about what happens here with the Wellington Phoenix, because if they don't make finals, it would be a bit of a bummer, right? Like, that would be a bummer.
Yeah, big bummer. I don't know what they'll do if they get to the finals. Like, at the moment, you never know, but at the moment, they're not filling us with confidence that they could make a run or anything like that. But you at least want to be there, right? And if they get there, it'll be 4 years out of 5 that they've made the finals. They only missed out by 1 point in the year that they didn't, and it was one of them COVID-affected living in Australia seasons. So I think we can safely say they probably had a squad worthy of making the finals. They just didn't quite have the situation around them that complemented that. I mean, look, neither team has won in their last 5. If neither team win this weekend as well, then they'll be in the finals. It's all that it takes. One draw. They might have had borderline their worst performance of the whole season against Western Sydney, but results elsewhere were pretty much across the board. Like, it's a bit convenient because you had a lot of teams above them playing a lot of teams below them, and they needed the teams below them to drop points, and they pretty much all did, which means that all the Phoenix need is 1 point. And even then, they might lose. They might lose this game, and then the 2 teams that are within range of catching them either might not make up the goal difference, or they might, because the Phoenix actually have better goal difference, surprisingly enough, than I think it's Newcastle and Perth, I think. I'll just check that. But so I don't know. The Phoenix have just managed to fail upwards somehow. They might lose this weekend to Macarthur and still make the finals because results elsewhere go their way, just as results elsewhere last week, amidst a terrible team performance, results elsewhere went their way then as well, and actually somehow boosted their chances of making the finals when they seem to be at a bit of a nadir. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. It's one of those things. It might take a little bit of a magic trick from Ufuk to turn around some of that confidence that you're talking about, though. That's the big thing from them, I think.
Is this, like, first question, is this more of a getting the lads up for the game type of encounter, or is it more like fixing some tactical, strategic, individual stuff? Give me a simple answer and then we'll go from there.
Simple answer, the first bit. I think it's way less, because I don't think we've seen any major tactical changes from them throughout the season. I don't think it's been like when they played well, they've kind of played the same way. When they played poorly, they've kind of played the same way. It's less about that way not being any good than it is about, if you make mistakes in either penalty area, no matter how you play building up to that, you're going to get punished. I think that's more the factor, and I think that belies, a lack of confidence in front of goal and a hesitancy at the back, a lack of trust, a lack of whatever it is, which all goes towards the first part. Is you just got to get the lads up, you got to shake them out of whatever woes they're going through. And I mean, Western Sydney will punish you if you defend on your heels. We saw that. Macarthur might not. Like, it might just be a more forgiving matchup for them, which is exactly what they need. They are the bottom team on the table. Just to clarify, that's Perth Glory, Newcastle Jets, and Western United are all within range. All of them would go equal on points with the Phoenix with a win. Phoenix are the only team in the top 6 who haven't clinched their final spot. Newcastle are away to Sydney FC, so that's a game that they could very easily not win. And if any of these teams don't win, the Phoenix are That takes them out of the running. So Newcastle, if they don't beat Sydney FC, sweet as, that's them gone. Perth actually plays Western United in the other game. So, I mean, that could go either way, but say that Perth win, who have the better goal difference, Phoenix have a 7 goal difference advantage over Western United. So that's, even if the Knicks lose and Western United win, that's a lot to make up for. Perth, it's only 2. So if the Knicks lose, Perth win by multiple goals or either way, they would go ahead. But then that's where the Phoenix, if they get a draw in the game, which happens before that, then it doesn't matter what happens in the other one. So it's still possible, but actually looking at the table, I'd say they're still very clearly the favorites to make it through. Again, what happens beyond that, don't know. But that's the picture for the Phoenix to make the top 6. It's still pretty good. So that's just, I mean, that's what the manager's got to tell them, right? It's like last 5 weeks has been crap, but the season leading up to that, you deserve to be where you are. Like, you've obviously got the results, the points on the board to be where you are. Now just like regather some of that.
Yeah, you complicated it way too much. They just need a draw. Like, let's just keep it simple. Yeah, get a draw.
Yeah, that other stuff only matters if they don't win or draw.
Yeah, get a draw or win, and we'll just focus on that. But the reason I asked you that, the initial question, was like to go the first route of getting the lads up for this game, and that being the more important aspect of Phoenix football. This could be Ufuk Talai's last game in charge as coach. So if he can't get the lads up in his last game, or the lads can't get up for Ufuk Talai and at least get a draw in this game, you don't, like, what are you doing? You're not showing up to send out your coach out as not a winner, but like on a decent note. And I think there is plenty of reason to suggest that they should be able to get up for this game and find a bit of mana in front of goal, find a bit of mana in front of both goals, in front of the opposition goal and in front of their own goal, and sharpen up and get the draw at least. So, like, yeah, if they can't do that, like, they're just sending out Talai on a down buzz load, and then it's up to Italiano. But we will see what happens there with the Wellington Phoenix against Macarthur FC, 2 of the best teams in the A-League going at it. Sorry, 2 of the best teams in the last 5 games going at it here, and the Wellington Phoenix need a draw. As the wildcard just said, they could scrape in with a loss, but we're not going to think about that. The Blackcaps, they are preparing for an ODI series against Pakistan. And this is a sneaky one. This is a sneaky fun one. The first thing I'd like to throw up here about the Blackcaps is a full-strength Blackcaps team defeated Pakistan in an ODI series a few months ago. Now there is a second-tier Blackcaps team coming up against Pakistan in Pakistan. So you've got a nice kind of re-up series. We're re-upping with a weaker team. Can they get the result? If they get the result, that will be quite impressive heading deeper into a World Cup year. As we said, we might have said this on the Patreon podcast. The Blackcaps went to Pakistan, drew a test series. They won an ODI series in Pakistan. Now they've drawn a T20 series in Pakistan. So that's all 3 formats, and they haven't lost a series in Pakistan. The chances of not losing the ODI series decrease because it is a second-tier team, but it's just an interesting matchup against Pakistan specifically. And, of course, we've got some World Cup spots to keep an eye on. The players in my World Cup bracket here, we've got Will Young, Mark Chapman, and Henry Nichols as the batters. They're competing for a couple of spots in that World Cup group. Bowlers, we've got Adam Milne, Blair Tickner, and I think Ish Sodhi is less on the fringe because it's going to be a World Cup in India. But if Ish Sodhi stinks it up in this series against Pakistan, then I think the Blackcaps selectors might be more inclined to go with the Bracewell and Santner combination. The thing is, though, Ish Sodhi was the leading wicket taker in the Test series against Pakistan in Pakistan. He didn't play the first ODI in that full-strength ODI team. Blackcaps lost. And then he played the next 2 ODIs. Blackcaps won. And in the T20 series, he was the most economical Black Caps bowler. So what I was saying about the Black Caps in all three formats against Pakistan, Ish Sodhi has been somewhat of a key figure in each format in Pakistan, which I find quite interesting. So I think there is far more intrigue and funk around which batters step up for the Black Caps in the series. Mark Chapman's got the form, which is good for him. And he also hit a century. It might have been on that European league. He hit a big old century last year. 101 not out at a strike rate of 135, which is absolutely destructive. Will Young, however, so Mark Chapman only played one game. He has only played one ODI game since the start of 2022. Will Young's played 8 games. And Mark Chapman's century was either against Ireland or Scotland or Netherlands. Will Young has also not played against the best nations. He's played against Netherlands, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. But he's got 340 runs at an average of 57, 2 centuries and 1 half century. Henry Nicholls, he's played 10 games since the start of 2022, 287 runs at an average of 32, 2 half centuries and 10 innings. So Chapman and Young feel better right now, but Henry Nicholls, as we know, the Black Caps, there's a lot of mana, good team culture. They're going to give lads ample time to score their runs. Case in point, Henry Nicholls himself. And Henry Nicholls has played World Cups before, which I think is an interesting nugget for him. But those are 3 main batters to keep an eye on. Tom Latham is the leading run scorer since the start of 2022 in ODIs for the Black Caps, because he's played the most games. He's the only player to have batted in more than 20 innings. And the next batters, Finn Allen, Michael Bracewell, Devon Conway. Daryl Mitchell's going to be playing. Martin Guptill, Williamson, Glenn Phillips, none of them are playing in this series. So we've got, 2 out of the top 7 batters for Aotearoa in this time frame playing in the series. And it's the same thing for the bowlers. Matt Henry's the leading wicket taker. And then you've got Southey, Bolt, Ferguson, Bracewell, Santner. So 1 out of the top 6 bowlers for the Black Caps in this period is playing in the series. So that's where we get the second tier idea from. What tickles your fancy from more of that I just spewed up?
Well, I, in the variety show, looked at some of the games played since the 2020 World Cup. And I think from what you're saying there, it sounds like the ODI squad, even though it's mostly the same guys between the ODI and the 2020 squads, it's pretty much the same. And they even added Mark Chapman to the ODI squad at late notice because he scored so many runs. So like, well, you might as well stay. The funny story there being that he apparently had his bags packed at the game, like there, so he could go straight from the stadium to the airport to fly home. And they were like, no, we'll get you back in the same hotel room and everything. So that was nice, and he certainly earned that.
Interrupt you there.
Yeah, go for it.
There was a reason why Chapman wasn't in the squad to start with. Because as we've said, he didn't score any runs in the domestic summer. So he didn't really demand selection from the Kiwi summer. But fair enough. You dominate a T20 series against the full-strength Pakistan team. Yeah, we're flexible. You can stick around. You can build your case. Like that seems like good team selection, good coaching.
Yeah, especially to dominate it to that extent. Like you want to at least see what you got there, because it's not just that there's a lot of the same dudes hanging out in that same squad. It's Pakistan are going to have a lot of the same bowlers too. He's already been crunching them in the T20 stuff, so you might as well just like ride the hot hand. So that's cool. I'm sure they can find a spot for him in the 11. The point I was going to make though is it does seem like this is more of a second strength ODI squad than it was a second strength T20 squad. Like the T20 stuff was a bit sort of half and half. It was definitely second tier. There's probably a couple guys that might be even scraping and slightly lower than that. Just getting the experiences up just because of the types of players that were out. But it actually almost seems like the ODI squad is probably a bit further from the ideal 11 that they would have than the T20 stuff was. But that's I don't know. I would be interested to look at some of the to see who was playing in those 11s and the first time they were there a couple months ago compared to when we start seeing 11s for this series, being able to compare them then once we've got the first game of each series, how different they might look. But I mean, they've proved what they need to prove away to Pakistan over the last few things. So this is not a series where it feels like just there's no Super League points on offer. There is a World Cup to build for, but what we're talking about here is one or two players are competing for starting 11 spots. You mentioned Sodi, I think, is a good example of someone who might be able to push his way into a starting 11 gig at the World Cup because he's sort of in and out. He's always around the ODI squads, but whether he's playing is a different matter. And then Will Young certainly seems like another one, especially considering that Williamson is probably unlikely to be able to play in the World Cup. There's a few of those, but it is also a little bit more about who's going to be guys 13, 14, and 15 in that World Cup squad. That seems like definitely there's a lot of guys in this group who are competing for those particular honors. And I mean, such is the depth that they have on offer in this format in particular, such is the amount of players they've been able to get through in white ball cricket over the last few months. It feels like there's some tough decisions to be made there. There's genuinely, I genuinely don't expect they know which way they would go with that if they had to pick the squad right now.
Also want to highlight Jimmy Neesham. He's only played 5 ODI games since the start of 2022. So he's also competing for some of that World Cup selection just because he hasn't really been in the team recently. And also, watch out for Henry Shipley. He's played 5 ODI games and he's got 11 wickets and an average of 17.63, which is quite impressive. Daryl Mitchell has a better record, 11 wickets and an average of 13.9. So Daryl Mitchell probably won't bowl in Pakistan, but I am curious, Henry Shipley, what can he do? Although him and Rachin Ravindra are unlikely to be pushing for World Cup selection unless they go Ravindra just to bolster the spin stocks even further. So we'll be here tracking all the Blackcaps cricket in this ODI series, and we always love to talk about the Blackcaps in our Patreon podcast every Tuesday. So that's even another reason to check in with the Patreon podcast, because we do digest Blackcaps deeply. We think about the Blackcaps deeply. We get into lots of themes and ideas and different bits and bobs about the Blackcaps in the Patreon podcast. NRL footy. The Warriors. Let's start there. They lost to the Melbourne Storm, as is usually the case on Anzac Day. And yeah, it's not fair. Yeah, life sucks. But it's all good. Let's get over it, flush the dunny, move on, because that is the Warriors, and that's what happens when you're away from home and you're slightly off your best. However, the effort was there. The mana was there, the intensity, the grit. It was all there, the vigor. Competing in a tough contest. That's undeniable. So the theme continues, the trend continues. Every game this season, the Warriors have showed up with, and I keep saying a certain level. It's like a certain level of vigor, a certain level of energy. And I don't know how to say it better, but the Warriors show up to compete every single game this season. And when you combine that with a New South Wales Cup team that is first, that frames how I view this Warriors team. They show up to compete every single game, all 8 games to start the season. That's impressive. And also the reserve grade team is first in New South Wales Cup. So those are just 2 things to hang your hat on for a Warriors fan, as a Warriors fan. And I'd add a third thing. This is the cloakroom. We're hanging our hat up here. We got a third hook.
Take off your dirty shoes.
We got a third hook to hang your head on here. This is a whopper. This is a fabulous nugget. The Warriors are 3-0 at home, which I assume includes that Wellington game. The Roosters, they are 0-3 away from home. So the Warriors are undefeated in Aotearoa. The Roosters have not won a game away from wherever their home ground is. And that, like everything that you absorbed in that Storm game, I think you can flip in the Warriors' favor for this game. It's going to be a ruckus, Mount Smart. It's going to be glowing in all its glory. And the Roosters haven't won a game away from home. Fair play. They have had a weakened roster to start the season. But the Warriors, they're going to show up to compete, and they're going to be fizzed up by the home crowd, which is quite impressive. Also, like, only the Seagulls are 3-0 at home. Well, the Roosters are 4-0 at home and 0-3 away. So they only win games at home, so shout out to them. But looking through the other teams, the Seagulls are 3-0 at home, and that's it. So the Warriors, who would have thought during the pandemic that having home advantage would be useful? Like, everyone loved to take a big old poo on the Warriors during the pandemic, and suddenly we're seeing to start this season that home advantage is an actual thing. And it's something that the Warriors never had for 3 years. So, I don't know, maybe it's important, maybe it's not. As far as the Warriors team, who cares about the Warriors team? Like, there are changes. Tane Tuaupike's on at fullback. Wade Egan comes in and all that stuff. Like, there's a bit of tinkering. We'll have to wait and see with Dylan Walker, but it's just, can the Warriors show up again? And if they show up and they're like fizzed up from the Mount Smart crowd and they get into their footy, I think they can trouble the Roosters. And I'm curious, because you're a Dragons fan and you played against the Roosters last week. So you had a front row telly seat. You had a front row seat in front of your telly watching the Dragons almost defeat the Roosters. First of all, did you have any takeaways about like Joey Manu at 6 or Brandon Smith playing at hooker for the Roosters?
Takeaways? Not really, other than the fact that they're clearly really good. Like, Brandon Smith, I thought, had a really strong game. Manu was a little bit quieter than I thought, partly because I think they let Luke Keary do a lot of the, certainly obviously Keary was going to do all the kicking and stuff like that, but they let him do a little bit more of the playmaking. So it didn't feel necessarily like a pure 6 performance from Manu. He did get a lot of, like, I don't know, just shifting the ball through his hands and stuff. Very good at that. And you always know he's a threat to run, which is a clear issue. Trying to defend that. But honestly, I thought from that game, the Kiwi dude who had the best performance was Jared Wairau-Hargreaves. Was superb in that game. And him and Jack Bird seemed to have a little bit of a beef thing going on. I'm not sure what that was, but there was a couple of times where those two got tangled up. I unfortunately for Birdie, I know who I'm backing if that one goes to fisticuffs, but it was a nice little undercurrent in that game. But it's, yeah, I mean, the Kiwi lads on that team are top notch. Like, that's one of the strengths of that Roosters team in general, is the Kiwis players that they have are fantastic, and they're all like, I don't know, when you got that many weapons, it's a danger. But I also thought the Roosters, I mean, you might have more ideas. You mentioned that they've been through like shuffling up a bit of their team throughout the start of the season. I don't know, and you might have better ideas on this. I don't know why, but there's definitely a sense that the Roosters were softer than I thought they would be, at least. Like, there was a spell in the first half of the second half where they just let the Dragons score like 3 quick tries, and the Dragons weren't even in that game at that point. I think they scored just before halftime as well to even get within range. Like, it was a strange one where the Roosters felt like the Roosters of old, for the start that they had, would have just gone on and won like 40-10, and they didn't. And I wonder the Dragons weren't quite able to capitalize. They got back to level, but they didn't lead at any point in that game, and they just typical Dragons couldn't get themselves in the right territory to be able to challenge in the last sort of 5-10 minutes when it was a close game like that. But usually through their own errors. But that's not been the first time that's happened this season. The Warriors are a different team though, because the Warriors, as you say, will give you that they'll have that 80-minute baseline of effort and intensity. Like even if the mistakes are coming in, they're going to give you at least that much. The certain level, they'll have that. And if the Roosters aren't going to be an 80-minute team, particularly because their road stuff hasn't been as good as their home stuff this season, that is a game where I think the Warriors are much better suited to capitalize on that, certainly than the Dragons were.
Just quickly, the last time Joey Manu played at Mount Smart Stadium, he had 401 run meters.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. It's hilarious. And it's always funny, part of that Australian Roosters discussion, and it's like Joseph Suoliti, James Tedesco, and Joey Manu breaks records in Test footy, like that's what he does. But watch out, because if Joey Manu's got that Mount Smart flavour in front of the friends and whānau from Tokoroa, like he'll be, if he gets 200 run meters from number 6 in the halves, that is the equivalent of 400 run meters from fullback in a test. To your point about the Warriors, they're still first in completion. And they're the only team at 82% completion. There are 3 teams on 81%, Dolphins, Panthers, Cowboys. And there's 5 teams 80% or higher. The Storm are 5th, but the Warriors are the only team on 82% completion. So in theory, they just keep putting themselves in the contest, and whether the Roosters dip away or not, the Warriors, buoyed by that Mount Smart crowd, they should be able to maintain an 80-minute level of performance. The thing about the Roosters, though, is that they manage the season. And I checked in with the Raiders because I wrote about Matthew Tomoko, and the Raiders, like literally this time last season, they had the same kind of record. So there's all these stories about like the Raiders losing early in the season. It's like that's what they do. I don't know if it's deliberate or not, because there's a lot of information around Roosters and Trent Robinson and how he likes to manage the season. So if you like the Warriors, this is their second game against the Roosters already. So if you're going to play the Roosters twice, you want to do it at the start of the season, because they're not playing their best footy at the start of the season. And that's why you've seen lots of tinkering in the Roosters team squad with Sam Walker and all that, because they are building into their season. They don't play their best footy now. They play their best footy later on in the season. And the thing that through the Kiwi-NRL lens, I've been tracking Nofahu White, who was named on the extended bench this week, but he did play against the Dragons. And all you need to know about the Roosters and their player availability is whether Nofahu White plays or not. Because if he doesn't play, then he's not. Then it's like Angus Crichton's back, Satili Tupanui is back. They've got Nathan Brown now, so all those dudes are playing ahead of Nofahu White. If any of those dudes are unavailable, then Nofahu White, Bay Roskell Jr. from Kelston Boys High School, he's playing in the middle for the Roosters. So the Roosters this week, they got Matt Lodge, they got Tupanuia, they got Angus Crichton, they got the Butcher Brothers, Waidea Hargraves, Lindsay Collins. Like, they're looking as good as any other team. And shout out to Jackson Paulo, just sneaking in on the wing there. Fantastic to start the season after a rough finish. I think he's a Northcote junior from Auckland. So all of it is to say, I think the home advantage is going to be massive for the Warriors in this game. And who knows how they actually line up? Who knows what the combinations look like? I'm being intentionally vague about the Warriors, I think, because, again, I'm curious and I want to learn more about how the Warriors work through a season. Because it's one thing to win games of footy in the NRL when you've got all your best players available. but that's not going to take you deep into the finals. What takes you deep into the finals, and you might know as a Dragons fan, is what happens when you're missing Jack Bird. What happens when you're missing Jack DeBellin or Ben Hunt or Tyrell Sloan or any other battlers?
Only one of those players is making a difference to the Dragons.
Obviously not Zach Lomax, because he's not as good as Matthew Tomoko. But the Warriors are competing with a lot of changes in their team. And I don't know if that's necessarily conducive with winning, but they are competing with a lot of changes in their team. And when you stack that on top of the New South Wales Cup thing, that tells you something about the Warriors club-wide. There's a certain level of competition in the Warriors. There's a certain aspiration for excellence in the Warriors, where the NRL team competes regardless of who is available, and the New South Wales Cup team is first. And in the New South Wales Cup, the Warriors also face the Roosters, another home game. And their team's kind of stock standard. We do have Leka Halasima starting again. You'll see if you check the Warriors, although shout out Tane Tuapiki, he's starting at fullback for both teams, so that's good for him.
He must be pretty fit.
If you see the Warriors New South Wales Cup team list, Leka Halasima is named on an edge and Demetric Sifakula is named in the middle. From what I've seen, Halasima usually plays in the middle, and Sifakula is usually playing right edge. Keilani Going, who is on the extended bench, he's from Northland. He plays on the left edge for the New South Wales Cup Warriors. So a 17-year-old dude is playing in the middle of the New South Wales Cup Warriors team. Like, that is ridiculous. Let's wiggle in some other Kiwi-NRL topics. Hard and fast, Eels versus Knights is a Friday night game, and this gives us Dylan Brown versus Kalen Ponga. From my preseason ideas, I think Dylan Brown's a better number 6 than Kalen Ponga. Kalen Ponga returns. He's returned recently from his head knocks. Dylan Brown and the Eels aren't as good as they could be, so that's an interesting one. And also, shout out Wiremu Greg. He's from Northland, Whangarei. He is named at starting prop for the Eels, and he's coming up against Leo Thompson, who is still starting prop for the Knights out of Hawke's Bay. So you've got Dylan Brown versus Kalen Ponga. You've also got Wiremu Greg versus Leo Thompson. 2 young Kiwi forwards. How good?
Yeah, how good. Has Greg been playing that much? Because you've mentioned Leo Thompson a few times as someone who's had an excellent start to the season and really like reinforcing the starting gig. Has that been the same for Wiremu Greg, or is he just sort of like, this is the opportunity?
He's been starting over the last few weeks, but what usually happens, he'll play 20 minutes and then Brad Arthur won't put him back on the field, which is part of the annoying Eels thing. Right. Early in the season, like first few games, he was on the bench and he wasn't getting game time. Like that stuff was happening. Now he's starting and he starts and he doesn't get many minutes. But I think Regan Campbell-Gillard is out injured, so that could work in Wiremu Greg's favor. In the same way that like one of the Saifidi brothers being unavailable worked in Leo Thompson's favor. Speaking of forwards, the Raiders versus Dolphins, you got one of the best forwards, Joseph Tapine, coming up against the Bromwich brothers, Jesse Bromwich and Kenny Bromwich. Joseph Tapine is from Wellington. Bromwich brothers are from Manurewa in Auckland. Jeremy Marshall-King starting at hooker for the Dolphins. I don't think you'll see Tomoko and Isako come into battle on the same edge. They both play right edge, so they'll be on different edges. Connolly Lemuelu's left edge, so he'll be coming up against maybe Elliot Whitehead, which could be interesting. Connolly Lemuelu played 80 minutes in that come-from-behind victory over the Titans, which was good for him. And also, Warriors coming up against Storm, folks would have seen a whole lot of Nelson Asafa-Solomona. And he re-signed for the Storm, and he's in a really interesting spot because of the departure of the Bromwich brothers. So now Nelson Asafa-Solomona is a big Donny in that Melbourne Storm forward pack. And that's really exciting because He's one of my favorite Kiwi-NRL players ever. Highlighted how he was playing edge forward at the end of last season, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now he's back in that Storm team. Let's see who the Storm are playing this week. Also, like, the Roosters also played Anzac Day. So it's the same turnaround for the Roosters against the Warriors, but they have to come to Auckland. So everything about the Warriors' short turnaround, flying to Australia and back, now it also applies to the Roosters because they played the Anzac Day fixture as well. Storm have
on a bye by the looks of it. Yeah.
Yep. So you won't see any of the
Oh,
Storm.
well.
Dragons, they're coming up against the Bulldogs. You'll see a lot of Hayes Perham. He might be better than Tyrell Sloan.
Sloan was the sort of instigating factor in that little mini comeback that the Dragons had in the second half. He was very good then. A little quiet elsewise, but they haven't sacked their coach yet, from what I've seen. Every week that the Dragons lose, I think, well, that'll be the one, since they've been talking about it since the end of last season. Well, the next one is going to be the one where Hook gets the hook, but hasn't happened yet. A loss to the Bulldogs would probably do the trick, I would imagine. But then again, I thought that the last 2 weeks, so what do I know? Lots of Hayes Perham running meters in this one, I reckon. It seems like a safe prediction.
Dragons, they do have Ben Hunt though, and he'll be trying to dictate proceedings with his kicking game, which he'll probably try and target Hayes Perham with his kicking game. And Hayes Perham, Rotorua Jr., Picquiao Jr., from Rotorua, he'll deal with that all good, so no worries.
Yeah, and that's the last. Those are the two Sunday games again, isn't it? It's Warriors, Roosters, and then Dragons, Bulldogs. I don't know why that. There must be some kind of thing, because you know how the Broncos always play on Thursday or Friday night, including this week. They're playing on Friday night again. It seems like the Warriors and Dragons always seem to do it's not always the same way around, but quite often there seems to be like they're the two Sunday games. I don't know if that's just fluke or it's just I notice it because they're the two teams I have the most focus on, but that seems to happen quite a lot. I don't know. More sense made this week because they're obviously it's the longest possible recovery after playing Anzac Day, so it makes sense this week, I guess.
Yeah, the NRL draw is one of the things I could care least about.
Apart from the Warriors playing the Roosters twice in the start of the season.
Well, clearly none of it makes sense. So, like, who gives a shit? Like, just that's something that you there's so many things in life that like give you a reason to make excuses, and you can either make the excuses and have a complaint about it, or just deal with it and not give a shit about it, get a bit stoic, get a bit zen, get a bit mindful, and keep it moving. Shout out to the Dragons. They have up their Kiwi-NRL stocks, and I keep reminding you because, let me get this name right, Te Umu Arariki Hiramia Tukeri. I believe he is a Turanga Waiwai Jr. He was playing in the Dragons SG Ball team at centre. Now he's playing Dragons Jersey Flegg at centre. And they have had Riley Pascoe from Greymouth. He's been playing in the halves for the Dragons Jersey Flegg team. And they are playing the Bulldogs this weekend in Jersey Flegg. The Bulldogs have Mariki Aumua, who was a starting half in the Bulldogs SG Ball, and now he's starting half for the Bulldogs Jersey Flegg. So now that the SG Ball footy has stopped, there's a lot of players. Obviously, I focus on the Kiwi-NRL players who are moving straight from SG Ball under 19s in New South Wales to under 21s. And that's a key development observation alert for me. Like if I'm seeing blokes that go from SG Ball to Jersey Flegg in the same season, literally over a couple of months, that tells me that those lads are held in high esteem at their respective clubs. And there's a couple, let me see if I can just quickly roll through some more. Like Casey Newton-Whare has been doing it for the Melbourne Storm team. He's a Rickerton junior from Christchurch. He was playing SG Ball for the Storm. Then he's been playing a few weeks of jersey flag for the Melbourne Storm team. Josiah Karapani's got a weird one because I said last week I think that he's playing jersey flag, but then he gets named on the extended bench for the Rabbitohs new NRL team without playing reserve grade. So who knows what that means. And yeah, I talked about Tavita Henare Schuster. He's starting centre for the Roosters, but the Roosters also have Benaya Iowelu starting at hooker. And we talked about him. We always talk about Benaya Iowelu when we always talk about the Roosters' Kiwi-NRL depth. Well, he was starting hooker for the SG Ball team all season. That's finished. Now he's starting hooker for the Roosters jersey flag team. Easy mahi. And there's a lot of that. We've also got under 21s footy starting in Queensland, which is really good as well. Interesting stuff happening. Any other hard and fast rugby league thoughts, questions?
Not from myself. Unless you got anything else to add.
I do have one thing to add.
Well, you got a minute 43 to get it out there.
The Roosters have missed 15 more tackles than the Warriors this season. The Warriors are 10th for missed tackles. The Roosters are 9th. So I reckon a lot of those missed tackles for the Warriors would have come in that Melbourne Storm game. But the Warriors are 10th for missed tackles, which means 9 teams in the NRL have missed more tackles than the Warriors. So the Warriors...
Is it true that Tom Ala's now missed his first tackle of the season, I hear? Is that the streak is over?
Tom Ala here, 18
tackles, 100% record.
18 tackles, 1 miss versus the Melbourne Storm. His perfect tackling record has come to an end, but if he finishes with less than 10 missed tackles this season, that is ridiculous. So we'll keep track of that. Big up yourself, big up Aotearoa, big up Aotearoa Sport. Make yourself heard, make yourself seen and known if you're enjoying this content, and love yourself. How about that? Just love yourself. Kia kaha, stay beautiful. Chur, chur.